I get texts from friends sometimes who are just like, "Hey, when are you moving back to the United States?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to." And they're like, "Why?" And I always tell them like, "Look, if I go to a coffee shop and I put my MacBook on the table, I can go take a shit for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and no one will steal my laptop. It will never happen." So like, wait, no one would steal your laptop. You can just leave a MacBook sitting there. It's like, yes, it's a high trust society. Um, and the cops do not. Obviously, I'm a KCTU member, which I guess we'll talk about our union work later.
Yeah.
But your everyday like beat cop, they don't carry guns. They are well. For one, I never see them. It's rare that I even see a police officer in South Korea. So one thing I love about living here in South Korea is just safety, high quality public transportation. I can walk around at 3 o'clock in the morning anywhere, and I live like the downtown Hyundai, Busan, the second largest, most important city in South Korea after Seoul. And I can walk to the beach. I can walk around anywhere I want, and I have no fear whatsoever. The statistical probability of me being subjected to any kind of violent crime or robbing or whatever is basically zero.
See, I like to leave my laptop at a cafe unattended, just hoping somebody messes with me.
Just playing
hoping
full blast like
somebody
game
steals it, so I could just pull out my AK-47 and an AR.
which you have a right to own, by the way.
Yes.
Obviously, recently there was the worker who, set himself on fire.
That's what we saw in the United States. We did see a guy set himself on fire. But
Right.
in association with KCTU, that's the general
Young Hadong. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So,
his name.
Well, one thing I think you and your listeners should understand is, when this happens, I'm a KCTU member. I'm one of the primary leaders of the teachers union organizing the private academy industry in South Korea. When I heard the news that one of our union leaders, comrades from the construction trades union under our confederation, Minju Nochong, Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, felt so desperate that he had to set himself on fire. That was very emotionally traumatizing for many of us because one of our comrades committed suicide to protest the government thing. So I just want to honor his memory. I live in Busan, and which is it's a south side beach city, but me and two KCTU staff comrades and one of our foreign members, a South African comrade, went to Daegu today to meet with members in Daegu. And, we met at the KCTU office there, and Construction Trades Union had a picture of him on their backs. They had printed out things that they attached to their vests. It's a South Korean tradition where we wear these like KCTU vests and we attach like pictures. So for those of us in South Korea, it's quite an emotional thing. It's very difficult. So I just want to honor the memory of Yang Ho-dong. He leaves behind, I think, 2 daughters and a wife. He was forced into this sacrifice. So, for example, we went to the Daegu KCTU office from Busan today, and then we were informed that the office was raided by the police Friday. So basically, in South Korea, we have a right-wing neoliberal government, Yoon Suk-yeol, who is an extreme right-wing liberal. He is a former prosecutor. He was in charge of like the Justice Department. His goal, he wants to, abolish we have a Ministry of Gender Equality and Family, which is about, South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world. And a lot of that is related around that women don't want to have children because they have to work and they get no support. So he wants to abolish that that ministry, which of course is going to not help the birth rate. What we're facing right now. So our Daegu office was raided yesterday. Our Busan office here, where I live on the south side of South Korea, was raided a few months ago. The Seoul office was raided. They take documents and intimidate people and accuse them of being pro-North Korean, etc. Our union is facing unprecedented, well, not unprecedented, but I would say unprecedented in the democratic era of South Korea, because maybe many of your listeners do not know. until the early 90s, actually, South Korea was a right-wing military dictatorship, similar to, Allende in Chile, for example.
You mean Pinochet?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. Not Allende. Allende was the guy.
Yeah, Allende was the guy that was killed by.
Yeah. So, I'm sorry.
No,
It's early morning. It's early morning here. I'm sorry. I'm still drinking my coffee.
It's all good.
So yeah, Pinochet. Yeah, but KCTU, our union federation, we have 1.6 million members, and I'm deeply proud to be a member of this union federation. I would consider KCTU like the model that the United States labor movement should follow.
Was KCTU just recently on a general strike? Something equivalent to their Teamsters? It was an industrial-wide strike in relationship to trucking. Is that what occurred?
Yeah, this was, well, it's been going on for a while, but the trigger was there were a couple things in November and December of last year, 2022. So KCTU, our truckers union members, they went on strike and they shut down the trucking industry, which, Freddie knows this. I don't know the rest of you guys personally, but I know Freddie knows this. In the U.S. left, we talk about choke points, how it's strategic to, organize UPS and logistic companies. So the KCTU truckers just stopped shipping or trucking concrete and other construction materials, and it shut the economy down. It cost the country many millions of dollars, many hundreds of millions of dollars. But so Yoon Suk Yeol, our current president, is from the right wing. So just to give you a little context, you may have seen in the news about right before I moved here in 2018, Park Geun-hye was the president of the country. She was the daughter of Park Chung-lee, and he was a military dictator backed by the United States.
Damn.
So, if I had been doing what I'm doing in the 1970s, Park Chung-hee would have.
Yeah, you would have been immediately brown bagged and like never been seen again.
Yeah, I mean, our podcast wrestler over Asia, Jung-hoon Park, has told me a lot about this. Well, it was also more sadistic. Like what they would do is they wouldn't actually execute you directly. What they would do is, let's say you're a young student activist in the Park Chung-hee administration, and they wouldn't just kill you outright. They were quite sadistic. So they would conscript you to military service. They would send you to the worst part of the military conscription because, even now, South Korea, every male has to do 18 months of military conscription. They would tell other right-wing soldiers there to torture you and force you into suicide. So that's the kind of history. And, obviously South Korea now is not like that. South Korea is for the most part, a modern kind of bourgeois democracy, liberal democracy, and in terms of like voting for National Assembly. Those kind of abuses are not tolerated. But, South Korea is a society in transition. So there are these like echoes of the military dictatorship period in the same way, like, Chile is a great example. I have friends in Chile. There are political forces there that have a certain nostalgia for that military dictatorship period. And there are political forces here in South Korea who have a nostalgia for the military dictatorship period here. And it has an impact on the politics and the nature and the character of like the Korean Labor Standards Act and labor laws, etc.
Well, that's what I found interesting in regards to what that industry-wide strike, because that occurred in Chile, unlike Korea, it seems to me, in Chile the labor movement is not as militant in striking out as it seems in Korea, because from what I gathered in terms of like news that came to the United States, and correct me if I'm wrong, that strike occurred precisely for the reason of the sitting president attempting to come within the sort of labor dispute in a way heavy-handedly against those against already existing truckers, that the rest of the truckers just went on that industry-wide strike, right?
Yeah. So basically what's happening, so I mentioned, I'm in Busan, which Seoul is like pretty close to the border with North Korea.
Yeah, but Busan is towards the south. Yeah.
This is the part where we have a map.
Busan is the southeast.
Or something.
So,
Yeah, I can put up a picture of a map.
Geography nerds. We're playing EU for a billion times Go ahead.
These motherfuckers
Oh,
know their geography. They've been playing EU for 4,000 years. They could probably tell you like the minor provinces and shit. So I think we're pretty good on that.
Yeah.
Well, so our comrade Yang Hodong, I think I sent to the group chat, or I at least sent to one of you. I forget who. The article from Jacobin, which is written by Kapsol, who's a friend of mine. That's not his real name. I know his real name, but I won't reveal it. But I am in Busan, but there's a city called Daegu. It's one of the largest cities in South Korea, but it's kind of in the middle of the country. We have a new union member there, a foreign teacher. By the way, I want to say I'm very proud of this. Friday, we got a communique, a memo from the Ministry of Employment and Labor. So 6 of us filed a lawsuit against a former employer, and we won about over $10,000 for everybody. So I'm getting almost $3,000 in stolen back pay.
Fucking
And
sick,
we're
dude.
we're touting that as a victory because we are not just organizing foreign teachers. So I guess I should give some context.
Well, yeah, because from
so-
what I remember you saying, that the case also established a precedent on whether or not your employer can choose the days that you go on vacation, right?
Exactly. So, all right. So this is the situation. And I will try to do this as quickly as possible. So South Korea has a education culture of cram schools. I think all English native speakers will understand what I mean by that. So my primary, I have all kinds of random part-time jobs, but my kind of primary job is I work at a government welfare center for children who can't afford private English hagwons. So it's funded by the government. I'm paid by the government, so everything's legal. But the private academy industry is rife with extreme labor abuses. So I'll give you an example. There is something called the E2 visa in South Korea. So let's say, Freddie. We'll use Freddie as an example. Let's say Freddie, you're a United States citizen. You're a native English speaker.
The dirty Bronx swap.
Yeah. Well, Bronx.
Jesus Christ.
Whatever. But
Yeah, fucking Dago Wapalini.
the only people who can legally teach English at private academies in the US have to be from 7 countries. That's the United States, Canada, Ireland, United Kingdom, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. I'm forgetting one, but there's 7 countries. So the only way you get an E2 visa is if you are from there, and the only qualification, the good Hagwons will require a TEFL certificate, which means teaching English as a foreign language, which I have one. I got it before I came here because in the United States, I was a full-time staff community organizer, but I also I taught English part-time for refugees who were given status, because if you get refugee status in the United States, you get 5 years of free English classes. So I worked for the state government, and I enjoyed that very much because it was these incredible, highly motivated like Afghan mothers and others who were just like, I need to know how to make doctor's appointments for my children. I need to know how to talk to my teacher. So everything I taught them, they like studied so hard, and then you could see the improvement in their daily lives, and it was very fulfilling. But I'm married to a Korean, so I have like a green card essentially. If an employer treats me like shit, I can walk out the door. But your average foreign English teacher here has what's called an E2 visa, and that visa is attached to the employer. So let's say you're an E2 visa, you like BTS, K-pop, K-dramas, etc. You want to come to Korea, and you like kids, and you want to teach, and then you come here with all these expectations that you're gonna have a great time, and then a Hagwon just totally fucking abuses you and treats you like an animal. In order to leave that job, you have to negotiate what's called a letter of release, because if you don't get that letter of release, you have to leave the country and start the whole process over again.
It's kind of funny to think that there's people that are into K-pop that are going over to Korea thinking that it's going to be perfectly fine with their boss. Like, oh, I'm going to have a great work experience knowing how K-pop stars.
Well, I mean,
literally completely slaves. I mean, this literally just sounds like fucking slavery, like literally serfdom. You got to negotiate with your boss,
it is, but
so you don't get fucking kicked out of the country.
Well, I got lucky. My first job here. So what my personal story is, I was working as a full-time staff community organizer in Tennessee up to 2018, and then one of my best friends, Tim, was living in Jeju. He had moved to Jeju to teach after teaching in China, and he had married a Korean lady. And he's one of my close friends. So I was talking to him. I was like, man, because I think especially Freddie. I don't know about the rest of you, but Freddie has been a staff organizer for a union or a social movement organization before, and it's very exhausting. You can't do it for too long. So I did. I was like, man, I'm just so tired. But I had this part-time job where I was teaching those refugees in the United States. So I was talking to Tim, confiding in him as my close friend. And
You're like,
so
man,
burned
I
out."
really need a fucking Korean wife.
Well, no, he already had a Korean wife, but
No, that's what
he
I'm
was
saying.
like,
You were
"Hey."
confiding in him, saying, man, I really need a Korean wife.
Like, yo,
Well,
dog, you
no,
got
that wasn't the plan. It was accidental. It was accidental. I'll tell you.
Yeah, sure.
Give me,
literally like
give
Fast
me a
and
minute.
Furious, like,
I'll
Tokyo
tell you
Drift
the full story.
type shit.
All right, yeah, all right, go ahead.
But he was like, "Look, you already teach English. You have a TEFL certificate. You clearly enjoy teaching English, but you're burned out at your main job. Just come to Korea, teach at some hagwon, and then hang out. And then, because like I live in Busan. Like Japan is like we can take a boat to Japan. Like so moving here is a great experience. Like flying from the United States to Japan, very expensive. Going to Japan from South Korea, very cheap. So if you have a university degree, clean criminal record, some kind of teaching qualification, you can do it. But no, he was like, yeah, just move here and like chill out for a year. But then, I met my wife at the hiking club, and then I was like, as we dated, I was like, wow, I can be superficially charming, but meeting a woman who's like, I know exactly who you are, the depths of your real personality, and I still love you. It's like I can't not leave this. It will never happen again. So yeah, I fell in love, and that's why I stayed in South Korea. And I'm very proud that we have been organizing both foreign and Korean teachers in the private academy industry, and we have. I sent that document. We've been, and that's one of many that we've done. We had a public press conference in Seoul in April about organizing the English private academy industry. And we've had extraordinary press coverage. We've had extraordinary wins. For example, we have a comrade, South African comrade, because of the economic crisis in South Africa, the highly educated people are moving to Korea because they qualify for that E2 visa. I have what's called an F6 visa because it's a marriage visa essentially, because my wife is Korean. So I can work the same way Koreans do. But these E2 visas, it's attached to your employer. And she's been subjected to extraordinary abuse. Teaching 15 classes a day, physically assaulted at work, stolen wages.
Physically assaulted by who?
But one of our union members.
Is it like is it like a sexual assault, or like what kind of physical assault?
No, it's a female. She's a female, and then the female director pushed her.
Oh, okay.
And also, just non-payment of overtime. They misclassified her, which can get you in danger with immigration as a foreigner. Not paying the insurances, etc. But she found out about the union. She joined, and I have not been that much helpful for her. I've had a couple of phone conversations with her, but two of our union members and also our staff have been extraordinary in supporting her. So Monday morning, I think one of our Seoul KGLU, KCTU staff, Minjin Nochung staff is going to call that employer and be like, look, this employee of yours is a member of our union, and that means we protect her. And what you have done is incredibly illegal. So you have to either, because she's owed significant sums of money. I sent you that document recently in that group chat.
Yeah.
These hagwons are fucked up. Luckily now I work for the government now, so I work for like a public sector thing. So I'm cool now, but I don't want anybody to go through what we had to go through, because these people, they threatened my wife. They found my wife's phone number. They threatened her and they said, "We're gonna sue you both." They threatened one of the guys who joined our case. They threatened him and said, "Well, this was a different hagwon, but they were like, we're gonna separate you from your family. We'll get you deported because he's married to a Korean." And that's
which is basically in terms of these sort of like E2 visas you're talking about. what are the established legal labor rights that are, I guess you're organizing in which there might be partial rights or full rights?
All right. Well, there have been two South Korean Supreme Court rulings about this. So anyone in this country, regardless of visa status, even if you're an undocumented migrant worker, you can join a union, fully protected. So this is a common misconception that we've been trying to convince people of, because we've started this teachers union, which I will say I've been in a leadership role in many campaigns in my life. I never expected. I thought I was kind of retired when I came to South Korea. I thought I was just going to be able to do Red Star Over Asia podcast and write some stuff and write my books and whatever. But this thing arose, so we have to do it. Okay.
So, just really quick, in regards to in your organizing, do you see oftentimes? I mean, you were talking about how these E2 visas are connected to the employers, how they're established in relationship to the employer. Do you see oftentimes in your organizing the attempts by an employer to strip the visa, to let go of an employee, to have them be stripped as a retaliatory? I mean, I must imagine that is pretty frequent. Or what? And if it is, what is sort of the what is the mediation that you guys as a union do in terms of fighting that?
So what happens with the E2 visa? There's also another visa called E7. So you guys have probably seen the news that South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the entire world. So that
I did not see that.
I heard that both Japan and Korea have a significant birth rate problem right now.
Right.
Too many fuck machines. Too much anime.
What Japan? Yeah. Well, yeah. I agree with you. I'm kind of I always tell my friends I'm a right wing conservative communist. But
that means no anime, no fucking, no K-pop, no nothing.
Fuck K-pop, fuck anime, anti-anime action.
We should have cultural norms that encourage people to get married as soon as they finish university. But anyway, I'll leave that aside. Let's talk about this. So
it's called Christianity.
Yes. So South Korea and Japan. So South Korea and Japan both. I visit Japan frequently because it's next door. But I don't speak Japanese, or I don't really know many Japanese people. I just go there for like sort of vacation things, but I can only speak about Korea. But my understanding is the situation is similar. So what we have in South Korea is we have an overeducated population. We have people who every young person gets like an art degree, graphic design degree. You can't have a country of art designers. So, and then like, manual labor, construction work, the kind of stuff you do, which actually pays way more money than trying to be a freelance. My wife is a freelance graphic designer. If she was like a carpenter or a construction trades person in Korea, she would make way more money. But there's like this cultural stigma around it. So it is a crisis. And also, South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world. And, to me, that's a good indicator of the health of a society. If people feel like, because, if you poll most people, some people just don't want to have children, and that's fine. It doesn't mean they're bad people. They just don't want to have children personally. But if you poll, the polling is quite clear. The polling data, the statistics are quite clear. Most people want to have children. Most people want to have that experience of raising a beautiful young child, but they feel like the expense, because we have this like extreme education culture where if you have a child, you have to pay significant sums of money to send them to these private academies. And that's harming our birth rate. And then our fucking dipshit idiot president, Yoon Suk-yeol, right-wing neoliberal, proposed a 69-hour work week.
Damn.
It's like, we have the lowest birth rate in the world. And we also have, at least last time I looked, maybe it's changed. Last time I looked, we have the highest youth suicide rate in the OECD countries. So obviously, clearly the problem is people aren't working long enough hours. It's like, no, we have a crisis. If people want to have children, but they feel that they can't, and they're not having children and doing family formation. So to me, that's a crisis. I think young people with their whole lives ahead of them should not be committing suicide. We need to enact social policies. We need to organize social movements and elect governments that can address that. Because I have a 16-year-old son, and I've seen him struggle with the South Korean education system and how brutal it is.
There's an easy solution that we're not seeing here, though. For all these, terms of population. You just send Al Pacino over there.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, send De Niro and Pacino. They'll take care. They'll take care of the
Yeah, I mean, he's
population
fucking
decline.
fertile as it is, pal.
Yeah, but I wanted to bring it back to the case. So like you know, you, as you were saying before, it established a precedent of, you know, the vacation time. So like, what exactly was like the context of the case? Like what instigated what in particular instigated the case, and like how was that precedent set? Yeah.
Okay, so South Korea on paper has actually pretty robust labor laws, much stronger than the United States. So under the South Korean labor law, when you most jobs have a contract year. It's like yearly thing. You re-sign the contract. So first year you should get 11 paid vacation days chosen by the employee. Second year is 15 vacation days. And then for each additional 2 years, you get one. It maxes out at 25. So if you work at a company for a long time, you get a month paid vacation.
Damn. Like,
What
okay,
happens with
so
hot
for like
ones?
for like American view, like for Americans, right? I'm part of a union, right, which is part of the Teamsters, but you know, recently has been split from the Teamsters. But that's beyond the point, right? I have a union job, and that union job gives me about after 1 year working there, I can get 1 week, just 1 week of paid vacation, and after 2 years, I get another week. But then I have to stay there for like I can only get another week of vacation pay if I have to stay there for like fucking 5 extra years. And on top of that, like if I put in 7 years, I get just 1 week, another week of vacation, and then so on and so on. So like it's crazy to me that even just only after 1 year, you still get like fucking like ass loads of vacation time. It's crazy.
It's national law. Yeah. So, but these hagwons, the private academy industry is basically mostly unregulated. So we have the laws on paper. And, you know, one thing I've been telling people to join the union was like, look, if you don't join the union, your legal rights, your human rights exist on paper only. We are the ones who enforce it. And if you join the union, we'll enforce it for you.
Right.
So
It's
yeah,
essentially
on
the same
paper,
situation here as well.
on paper, no. Actually, Korean labor, there's a whole thing, Korean Labor Standards Act. It's actually way stronger than the United States.
No, but I'm just saying that
labor.
in terms of your rights only exist on paper if you're not organized.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. Because on paper, the Korean Labor Standards Act is actually quite strong in terms of, you know, if you compare it to other, you know, Scandinavia, et cetera. Obviously, they have stronger things. But if you
Right, but
compare
compared to the
Korean Labor
United States, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's much stronger. But the problem is, if there's no enforcement mechanism, then it's just bullshit. It's paper.
Right.
So what happened with us? So me and 5 of my colleagues filed that lawsuit against my former employer. Now I work for the government, but of course I'm a leader in the union because of my ideological commitment. I have no workplace issues now, but at that previous place we did. So what they did was, you know, first year you're legally mandated 11 paid vacation days chosen by the employee. What the employer did was, one, they weren't giving us any vacation days at all. And then they chose to close without our consent. And then they counted that as our annual leave. So 6 of us filed a case with the Ministry of Employment and Labor. And it's been a long struggle. We filed that case in November. And we finally got the result, because I sent you Friday. And they ruled, look, you owe them the back pay. You have to pay them out for the annual leave that you denied them. And also these so-called company days, those count as your vacation. It's like, no, it doesn't. So Mo ruled said, no, if the company chooses to close without the consent of the employees, that is not your vacation time. So our back pay jumped significantly. So we have won. You know, I showed you that document. It was just the 6 of us who filed, but it also applies to, this is one of the largest hagwon private academies in the country, top 5, biggest in Busan, my city. So over 100 people are going to get significant sums of money in, you know, the $2,000 to $3,000 range minimum because of what we did. And I'm deeply proud of that. And I want to say I'm deeply proud of my union comrades from that company who are on the E2 visa. The company controls their visa, but despite that, they stood up and they fought and they made huge risks. So, and we also firmly established case precedent that the vacation days must be chosen by the employee, because most hagwons, the private academies, they choose your vacation days for you. So it's like, oh, hey, FYI, next Wednesday is a vacation day. It's
Right,
like, what
yeah,
the fuck are
that's
you doing on
that's
Wednesday?
bullshit. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but we've established that we're getting a more substantial document from the Ministry of Education and Labor. We've requested that, and we're going to get it and promote it throughout the whole national South Korean community. So yeah,
Excellent.
that's what our union is doing. We are winning concrete benefits. What's happening is people come here and then they don't do their research, and then they have a horrible experience. They get totally abused by their boss, and then they go back home and then they say, "Fuck Korea, don't go there." So one thing I've said to some of these hagwon owners is, look, I know the real Korea. I know because this is another thing too. Like when I brought up the labor issues at that workplace, they were like, "Well, you don't understand Korean culture. That's just how we do it." I was like, "No, they tell you. They say if you're a foreign teacher here and you complain about labor abuses, they say you just don't understand Korean culture." I was like, "Fuck you. My wife's Korean. I understand Korean culture quite well. The Korean culture I know is my union, Minchu Nochong, who the founders of overthrew a military dictatorship. These people Koreans don't put up with bullshit. You're lying."
Yeah.
You're insulting your own people. So that's the kind of gaslighting that goes on here.
Yeah, it reminds me of this argument that I had with somebody online a little while ago, where I was talking about how South Korea and Japan have such extremely high suicide rates, and it's because of how abhorrent the labor conditions are for a lot of workers out there. And this motherfucker literally said to me, "Oh well, it's just their culture. They're just suicidal because it's their culture."
They're just like
It's like, oh
you know,
yeah, yeah, no, suicide is cultural, right? Okay, right. It's like, come on, it's
Oh,
so
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
ridiculous.
Well, I'll give you a concrete example.
it's just like
back
the
up what you just
fucking
said.
the Last Samurai. There's just like that's like all of Japan. It's just like
Yeah,
the
it's
last.
like the entire their entire conception of Japan and Korea is based on the Last Samurai.
The fucking top.
Well, yeah, I'll give you an example. So I live in Haeundae, Busan, which is the beach area. It's the wealthiest part of the city. Our rent's pretty cheap, so I'm not wealthy. I'm not a class trader, but we have.
Yeah, I'll give it a pass.
It's a problem in South Korea. So like, we have a great roof where you can see the beach and also this local mountain called Jangsan, which I hike frequently. But, we have security guards in our building because it's like a very large apartment complex. When I have friends over and we have a little party, we're playing guitar and like drinking and we're just like grilling some gupsal, like pork on the patio. We like to go up to the roof and just like see the view. And all the security guys know me, but it's a protected thing. I have to like personally request the password to access that roof thing from the elevator, because it is a problem in Korea where people, unfortunately, they find a way to get to a roof and they jump off and they kill themselves. One of my best childhood friends was a recovering heroin addict, and then he was making good recovery, but he relapsed, which, people do. And then they can, it's not the end of the world. You can get back in recovery. But the dirty fentanyl, he got a heroin shot. It was loaded with dirty fentanyl and he died. And, I had to go to the funeral with his mother. And I, when I was a kid, I had sleepovers at his house. We played video games together. I was like her honorary son. And to see a mother screaming because her son is dead is the most horrifying thing that I would not wish on anyone. So yes, the United States has its own problems with this, but hyper-individualist liberalism, you cannot have a functional society based on that as the foundational unit of what you're talking about. There's no such thing as an individual. Individuals do not exist as far as I'm concerned. They exist to the extent that your leg, like, all right, if you cut your leg off, can your leg walk around and exist as an independent entity? No, it can't. Humans exist as communities, families, and that's it. And classes as well. There's no such thing like, this is obviously, I would say, of course, like the French Revolution, what we call the Enlightenment. I think that's an overgeneralization. We have to unpack that a bit. But obviously the idea that like, equality under the law, equal rights, dismantling feudal systems, etc. That's great. I'm not a fascist or a reactionary. But I think I have a certain interpretation of Marxism and communism. I do consider myself a communist. That, look, you can't. The core mistake of liberalism is viewing the individual as like the philosophical unit of how you construct society. So like starting with the individual and then we build out from there. I think that's a fundamental epistemological mistake that then warps everything. Because look, I am nothing without my relationship with my wife and my son and my community and the organizations I'm part of. Like me, if you just put me on, I'm nothing. And every human is the same way. You are defined by your relationships with other people. There's no such thing as an individual. So I feel like a large part of the left like recapitulates this sort of like libertarian understanding and a liberal understanding of how to deal with society, because I'm also like an Aristotelian virtue ethicist in that way, because look, a lot of the left is just like polyamory, drugs should be legal, let's pursue pleasure. It's like, no, what happens, as Aristotle outlined quite clearly in Nicomachean Ethics, what happens if you just pursue your impulsive pleasures, you become enslaved to those pleasures, and that's not freedom. True freedom requires constraints. So, for example, yes, is there a part of me that would love to just like, hook up and fuck random women at bars or whatever and like not totally disregard my work life, etc.? Yes. But that's a bad part of my brain. But me being a loyal married man and a loyal father and having constraints on my life actually enables, because if I was doing that, I would not be able to do the things like doing the union, writing, etc.
Right,
so
sure.
like true freedom requires constraints.
Well, listen, it's to be understood that the concept of an individual is a historically produced thing, right? Like having the leisure to be like, I think, therefore I am, like requires you not to be in anxiety of like the fear of what is around you, right? The fear of death, the fear of so many things. So yeah, like that's absolutely true, right? Like, but in the end of the day, like, yeah, no, there are individuals. We are individuals, and then like it does take place in the communitarians. We shouldn't be so illiberal as to deny that, right? Because then we do surrender ourselves to like stupid concepts like, oh yeah, this is just the Korean particularist way of doing things, like that could justify oppression and exploitation of a foreign, So I would just like say it's kind of both ways on that sort of account. Like when you deny the sort of like, I guess the sort of deeper personhood of individuals, right? Like that. First of all, that requires community in the sense that you're talking about it. Like you are nothing without these attachments, right? These attachments to others, to people, to friends, to family. So yeah. I was just like, my point altogether is just to like get over like these sort of things of like suicide, etc. We have to like fight this deeper alienation from ourselves, this sort of like perversion of individualism into like this sort of consumptive culture that is like essentially scratching an itch forever, right? Scratching a mosquito bite forever to like indulge all the basic
pursue enjoyment in essence.
right becomes like, as you're saying, like like slaves to our desire.
And that is
Yeah.
essentially like fundamentally the capitalist ideology is this endless. I mean, this even in the Constitution, right? The pursuit of happiness. The concept of the pursuit of happiness is a dubious thing in itself. But the whole point being like there's this consumptive relationship where we are almost in a religious way obligated to enjoy, right? Enjoyment becomes kind of a duty, and so yeah, ultimately I think the individual exists, right? Like conceptually, but there is never truly an individual independent of the collectivity, right? Like the individual is always exists within the context of the collectivity, right?
Right. To pay no mind to like individuality would be to ignore the contradiction between individuals and like the community and the whole as a whole that develops us as human beings, right?
Well, go ahead. Sorry,
No, I think that I think I finished up my point here.
Mike. I want to ask you a question in regards to this sort of tangent. In regards to you being like in this sort of like question of community, etc. You talked a lot about particularly your wife, your stepson, family, etc. But as for you as a foreign American engaged in mostly a industry that includes other foreigners, how do you find, what is the sort of establishment of brotherhood like in the general trade union with other Koreans? How does that find do you, like what are like sort of like, I guess what are like sort of the social implications? What are like sort of like the little cultural things that are kind of funny that like sort of establish that like brotherhood between you and the Korean working class?
So that's a great question, and also the other two comrades who just commented, you made very salient, very good points. So when I say the individual doesn't meaningfully exist, I'm not saying the individual doesn't exist in any way. Like obviously, We have our own individual lives. But I'm saying that, like, when you think about the narrative, as we all do, we think about the narrative of our life, and it's embedded in the community. Whether that's, you don't. I'm not trying to make some sort of traditionalist reactionary argument about like you must be married or have children or whatever. But we're all part of communities, and that defines our identity in very important ways. So,
So-
but to get to Freddie's question,
Yeah.
just yesterday, well, let me rewind a little bit. So, I think you're asking about the teachers union we've formed. For one, this is not
Well,
a
within
foreigner.
the industry.
What I'm asking you is more like, since the context of what you're talking about in the struggle is like more or less these people that are foreigners like yourself, like establishing a sort of front, a local, as we would call it in the United States, in relationship to your confederation. What binds you guys? Like, what is the like particular dynamic find sort of like, I guess, in a humanizing way, bonds you to the rest of the Korean working class?
So what happened is, Comrade Songgu, who is a brilliant young early 20s student activist who works part-time for the KGLU. So we have the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, which I'm very proud to be part of that, because I think we have probably the most militant trade union organization in the developed OECD arena. We have 1.6 million members. We're highly militant. We're facing huge state repression right now. I went to the office in Daegu just yesterday, drove some comrades up to meet with a local member there. The day before, our offices have been raided. The government has declared war on us, but we are standing up and we are fighting. They're accusing us of being pro-North Korean, et cetera. Bullshit. But to your point, so what happened was Sunggu texted me, found me on Facebook somehow, and said, "Hey, I've listened to your podcast that you run with some Korean friends, Red Star of Asia. I really like it. I think you're in Busan, and it's maybe hard for you to connect with local leftists because, previous to that, roughly half of the total population of South Korea lives in the metropolitan area of Seoul. That includes Incheon, etc. So I'm in Busan, which is the second city, and we have 6 million people here, but that's still considered kind of like small compared to Seoul. In Seoul, there are a lot. If you don't know Korean that well, you're a foreigner. There are many left groups that you can connect with. The South Korean Socialist Group, I'm a member of, International Strategy Center, et cetera. We're trying to change the name so it doesn't sound like a think tank, but that's a longer debate. But yeah, in Seoul, it's much easier to connect. But I'm in Busan, which is much smaller. And he was like, "Hey, I'm in Busan, and like, I love your podcast, and let's connect." So I immediately joined the union. And then we had this wage theft issue at my workplace. So I recruited some of my colleagues to join the union. And I will say that everyone I've ever met from the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, because I hang out with members, I know all of our staff, both in Seoul, nationally, and locally here in Busan. They take internationalism very seriously, and they recognize, because one of the unions under our trade federation is the Migrant Workers Union. So, and these are primarily people from like Nepal, Indonesia, Pakistan, etc., who are brought here to do farm work because we have this super low birth rate and we have kind of an overeducated population. I mean, overeducated is maybe the wrong term, but we have a lot of people here in Korea. Basically, every young person tries to get a degree in like the liberal arts or like graphic design. It's like, look, like my wife is a graphic designer, web designer, but you can't have a functional economy if everybody tries to be a graphic designer or a YouTube celebrity, right?
Right. So
there is a cultural stigma in South Korea around like trade work. Look, working with your hands and building stuff, like there's the wages are going up because there's a shortage, and also it's very fulfilling work. Like seeing something that you built is very fulfilling. I think Freddie knows this. I don't know about the rest of you guys, your background, but I know Freddie knows this as a construction worker. But I will just say this, like in terms of the Korean workers, I mean, KCTU, all of our staff, they are affiliated with some kind of socialist organization. KCTU is a very left-wing union. There are divisions within the South Korean left. Yeah, so there's basically two cleavages, or there's one cleavage, primary cleavage in the South Korean left. So we have what we call NLs, National Liberationists, and then People's Democracy, PD. So National Liberationists are kind of they're left-wing nationalists, and they view the primary contradiction as the fact that there are 28,000 United States troops here in the division of the Peninsula. So they view
they view Korea as like sort of a semi-colonial situation. And then PD,
which it essentially it is, right?
well, I don't know. I'm kind of in between these two tendencies. And then also, our podcast Red Star over Asia, we want to be viewed as a neutral platform, so we don't really take a collective stand on this. But the other side is PD, which Freddie, you've talked to Park Jong-hoon,
Yeah.
and he's more the PD tendency, which views they have a more internationalist, Marxist perspective, and they recognize that South Korea plays like a regional imperialist role, like a junior partner of the American imperialism. For example, Samsung runs companies in Vietnam, and the Vietnamese like police will like crack down on wildcat strikes, etc. So I am more aligned with that tendency, of course, but I have great sympathy for the national liberationists and some of the leaders of our trade union federation because I get it. My father-in-law, for example, he was born in Hamhung, North Korea. He was a refugee. He had to walk all the way to Busan, dodging bombs. His brother died of starvation on the way down. There is so many millions of families were separated after the Korean War, and there's a deep pain. I mean, I'll tell you a personal story. So Google a satellite or a Google Map thing. You can my in-laws live down the street from us. It's like I can walk there or ride my bike in like 10 or 15 minutes. And I knew that my father-in-law was from Hamhung. And imagine, Freddie, you're from New York. Imagine moving to another country and then knowing that you could never visit New York City again. That would be extremely I'm from Nashville, Tennessee. If I understood that I could never visit my hometown again, that would be very. But I looked up the Google Map thing because he left. He's 80 years old or 79 or something. He's almost 80 years old, I should say. So, he can never go back to where he grew up. So I pulled it up on Google Sat. And I was like, oh, this is what your hometown looks like now. And like Hamhung is like a very industrial city in North Korea. And you can look at it. You can see all the factories and whatnot. And, he started crying. And then I felt bad. I told my wife, I was like, oh, man, I thought this would be a nice gesture, but maybe it's too emotional. But he like hugged me and he was like, man, thank you for that. That's really cool to see. So, I mean, that's why I have sympathy for like the left nationalists because these people have parents and grandparents who, I mean, I don't know if you've seen the videos. I can send you one where periodically when the relationship is, the diplomatic relationship is good between South Korea and North Korea, they do family reunion things. There's a really heartbreaking video of like a 90-year-old mother meeting her like 70-year-old son who got separated from her for the first time. And so there's a deep pain in this country amongst Koreans. And, our previous president, Minju Nodong, it translates to Democratic Party. They're like the U.S. Democratic Party, center left, but Moon Jae-in had family from North Korea.
I wouldn't say that the U.S. party center left, but
centrist or whatever. Yeah,
I would call it center right ultimately. Yeah.
Well, yeah, Tariq Ali coined a good term, the radical center.
Yeah.
But Moon Jae-in went to Pyongyang and gave a speech with Kim Jong-un and said, we promise we will never have war on the Korean peninsula again. We are one people. And he made a really important comment. It's like, we were together for thousands of years. We've only been separated for 70 years. So we can get through this. And I'm not even Korean ethnically or nationally, but to me, that was very moving. So in order to understand Korean politics, you have to understand like there's a deep pain and anguish about the division of the country.
Well, let me ask you this in regards to sort of like, I mean, we were talking about how South Korea has had this history of dictatorship, really an extension of the actual imperialist intervention of the United States in the peninsula against the North Koreans and Chinese, etc. What is it like as an individual who is a red, being in a country in which is divided, by between a nominal government that is, incredibly vilified and isolated by the United States and all its other sort of like partners in the world, but is in this sort of like interesting moment of history where there seems to be a thawing of relations with with South Korea itself. Does this sort of like, I mean, do you have to be careful in what you say? Do you have to be careful on what you're like, what is minded? And like, how does that affect the overall sort of like temperature of the labor movement itself in regards to this, obviously this pressing, for whatever it's worth, even if you take an internationalist perspective, can't ignore the fact that the nation itself is divided on these lines, right?
So yeah, I should have mentioned this earlier, but in South Korea we have a Cold War relic law called the National Security Act, which it's technically supposed to be invoked for like people who are collaborating with the North Korean government, the Korean Workers' Party, etc. But it is quite liberally used to suppress, and especially during the dictatorship period, but now as well, because they're attacking our union with it. So it's abused by the South Korean government. So any kind of progressive social movement, or especially labor movement, our union, Minjunochong, Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, they accuse us of being North Korean, and or North Korean collaborators, and they try to accuse us of they try to invoke the National Security Act. So yeah, that's a challenge. But when I talk to people, I'm very active in our local community in Busan. I'm always promoting the union. I go to concerts, and I'm very like social in our community. So when I talk about the union, I promote the union everywhere we go, because a lot of the people I interact with are people who should join the union. I tell them, look, this is bullshit. It's a string up job. It won't hold up in court, because they're abusing this Cold War relic law, as I said, to accuse anyone engaged in any sort of progressive or social movement that includes LGBTQ, etc., or the labor movement, which I'm involved with, of being pro North Korean. And there's no evidence of that. Nobody in our union has contacts with people in North Korea. It's complete bullshit. So there's a lot of interesting history here, and I would recommend you guys. We have some episodes about the pre-Korean War communist left in Korea, Red Star over Asia. You can look it up on Spotify, etc. But what I explain to people is like, look, North Korea is not a model that I admire at all. I'm a communist. I'm a Marxist. North Korea is not the world I'm fighting for. But we have to understand why is North Korea as fucked up as it is. Why is North Korea such a distorted, degenerated model as it is? And in order to understand that, you have to study the history of how the Korean War played out, the massacres that happened, and then you have to study the Korean War itself, and then you have to understand the decades of sanctions, etc. Because this is sort of
also they don't have a Soviet model. They have a bourgeois parliamentary model of government as well.
Well, also Lenin wrote about this. Like Lenin's Last Testament, that great book by the Georgian Marxist, but I forget his name, but Lenin's Last Testament is the name of the book. Lenin warned about this. It was like, if we become isolated, we're going to degenerate and become something that we weren't fighting for. And that's what's happened in North Korea. Obviously North Korea, they are the author of many of their own troubles, but the international isolation and their reaction to the geopolitical environment is kind of rational from their perspective. So yeah, I mean,
Right.
When I meet someone, I don't go around saying I'm a communist. Like, I use democratic socialist because that's the more like PC term. But when I get close to someone, I'll say like, yeah, communist is an accurate way to describe my politics. They're like, well, what do you think about North Korea? And I was like, well, that's not the world I'm fighting for. North Korea is a garrison military state trying to resist like geopolitical repression. And yes,
yeah, it's a siege state. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't consider it the end of the world if people were like, just saying like, yeah, no, the DPRK is not is not the hellscape that it is propagandized to be. Obviously, they got problems, but like if recognizing the conditions that they're in and like the reasons for why they have a lot of the problems they have, like I think that's good, But obviously, I'm not saying that that the KCTU members should be going on and being like, yeah, fucking long live Kim Jong Un,
Yeah, no one does that in our union.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
But also, I want to say one last thing about North Korea.
Yeah,
one of my really good friends, American guy from California. He's a long-term expatriate migrant worker here. He has been to North Korea like 6-7 times. Because prior to the ban on visas, because it's not a North Korea problem. North Koreans are happy to have Americans visit. I plan on visiting North Korea as soon as it's possible when they lift their COVID restrictions. But he's been there 6-7 times, and he told me, like, because he's lived in South Korea for almost 20 years, and I asked him, I was like, what was it like? And he was like, you know what, it was kind of heartbreaking. And I was like, well, why? He was like, well, when you go to North Korea, you realize these are the same people that I've been living with in South Korea. And it's like, it breaks your heart that this country is divided because, we have stereotypes of like in South Korea, right? Like Ajoshi is like sort of older guy who's like drinking and entitled and like
doing dumb shit on the street. And everybody's eating gimbap, which is like sort of Korean version of sushi. It's kind of like a lunch snack. And it's like, yeah, I went to North Korea. It's like, yeah, obviously people are poor, they have less money, but they're the same people. It's clear. These are the Koreans in the north, Koreans in the south. And he was like, it breaks my heart that they're divided. But one thing is that, there's a misconception that when you travel to North Korea, because usually you have to be sponsored by a tour company. But once you go there, one or two, or probably 2 times minimum, and it's in the North Korean government is convinced you're not working for a foreign intelligence agency and you're not a journalist who's faking credentials, they give you a lot of freedom. So like my friend, he has traveled all over North Korea because they're saying, oh, they just show you like the wealthy parts of Pyongyang, right? But like he's been to the countryside and he's seen some people who are not having a great time, but they know that he's just genuinely interested in the country, so like he can wander around without any minder or guide. So I think
That's fucking cool.
engagements with North Korea, because I have some friends, because I told them, I was like, yeah, my goal is as soon as they lift the COVID restrictions, I'm going to go visit North Korea. They were like, well, you're handing money to a government, and I always tell them, like, remind me, what country did North Korea invade since the Korean War? I'm an American. We've invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, etc. All these things since the Korean
and
War.
Korea.
So if you like, all right, maybe if you're going to keep your point, then I shouldn't spend money in the United States either, because their argument is when you go to North Korea, obviously North Korea is under sanctions. Hard currency is very important. If I'm an American there, and these tours are quite expensive, like you do spend a lot of money, and that maybe goes to places that are not ideal. It's not maybe going to, increase like rice crop yields, etc. But it's like, all right, well, apply the same standard to the United States.
Right.
So should we not? Should Europeans not visit the United States because the government is engaged in all these war crimes over the past? So I'm like, engagement, one-to-one, person-to-person stuff is always the best thing. So
Yeah.
That's my view about that.
I wanted to quickly kind of go, because we are running short on time here, but I wanted to go back real quick to the worker who self-immolated. So what were the exact like reasons behind I guess what you could call the demonstration, and what would you say were like the causes of that incident, the key causes?
All right. So what's happening is, so we have in South Korea right now, and I really do have to go. I have an actual union meeting. I'm 15 minutes late already, but I'm going to try to wrap up in 5 minutes. All right. So what has happened is we had the trucker strike, which one of you already mentioned before.
Yeah.
We have a right-wing president. So Yoon Suk-yeol he's like a pretty far-right kind of Trumpian figure. But the National Assembly has a supermajority of Minjudong, which is the Democratic Party. That's the kind of the South Korean equivalent of the Democratic Party. So luckily they've been able to block. Yeah. But they're not as extreme as he is. He suggested that we go to a 69-hour work week, and they blocked it. So they have done some stuff. But anyway, so the trucker strike kind of paralyzed the South Korean economy temporarily, cost billions of dollars. And it was around primarily safety issues. So, this is the same in the United States. Like if you're driving long haul trucks, long distances, you need proper rest and decent work times, because it's also bad. It's bad for the worker, but it's also dangerous to the public. Sleep deprived truck drivers, that's not good for the public. So they were asking for a minimum kind of income guarantee, and they were fighting over safety issues and like time log issues. So basically they were running these truck workers into the ground where it was like it was becoming dangerous for them to do the kind of hauling that they were doing. Because if you're going to drive a giant truck hauling tons of material, you need to be well rested when you get in that car, right? Because it's dangerous for you, and it's also dangerous for people driving around you. So that was the thing. But so we had the trucker strike. It made a huge impact, and then Yoon Suk-yeol essentially declared war on Minchu-Nochong, Korean Confederation of Trade Unions. I can link you guys to. We did a live stream with one of our colleagues who actually is a KCTU staffer, if you want more context. But they declared war on our union, and they have particularly targeted the construction trade union. So, Comrade Young Ho Dong, God rest his soul. There is this tradition starting with Chon Tae-il, in the 1970s. Chon Tae-il was a young textile worker in the 1970s in South Korea, and he tried to start a union group, and it didn't go well to get the labor enforcement, and he self-immolated. Some of you may be aware that this is a thing that happens in East Asia, self-immolation as a form of protest.
Yeah.
I've talked to some of my Korean colleagues about this, and I'm like, suicide is never the way.
Of course.
But in the South Korean the political context, no one encourages it, of course, but he martyred himself. So he was under indictment. They made fake charges. The government is accusing the construction union of like kind of racketeering stuff, and it's bullshit. There's no evidence for it. There's a picture we have where 600 police raided the Seoul office. They left with they had their like evidence box, and there was like 2 pieces of paper in there. So it's bullshit. So he made a unfortunate decision where he went to the protest and said he was under indictment. He was probably facing potential prison time, and he set himself on fire. He leaves behind, I think, 2 beautiful young daughters and a wife, but
Yeah,
he's
it's very
become a martyr to the
unfortunate.
cause.
Again, if you
Yeah,
could
I
send me
mean-
a picture and his name, so I can put it up on a video, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I was at the Daegu. Daegu is about a 2-hour drive. Me and some union members, I drove them up there today, and we got there at the Daegu union office, and it just so happened that the construction trade union was meeting, and they all had a picture of him tacked to their vests on their back. So I mean, he is a martyr. We obviously honor his sacrifice, and we're going to fight the fact that, I don't know, it's a very emotional issue, and it's kind of difficult to process because I'm a proud, loyal, to know that one of our comrades like felt that he had to commit suicide to like make the cause. It's kind of hard to talk about. So
Yeah, for sure.
I wish construction union bosses in the States, when they get indicted for shit like the same. Honestly.
Yeah, right. If only the
all right, guys, I
only
really
the
got to go though.
contractors would.
Take care, bro.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot.
All right, have a
Thanks a
good one,
lot,
man.
Mike.
No, this has been
Uh,
fun. I wish I could stay longer, but I'm really late to this.
Yeah, I mean, we're running very short on time anyway. But again, I want to say thanks to Mike Cannon, organizer with the KCTU, the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, and check out his podcast, Red Star Over Asia. Thanks a lot. It was very enlightening. So
Yeah,
appreciate
no,
it.
it was a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, it was great to talk to you guys as always. All right, have a good day, guys. I hope to talk to you soon.
Absolutely. Take
Well,
care.
maybe
Have a
we
good
can
one,
invite
man.
you on our podcast. So, all right, cheers. Bye.
Yeah, absolutely.